Hey everybody, it's Jillian. If I look a little bit tired, well, I'm not tired. I'm actually really energized. It's a full moon outside, and I was up at midnight chasing my dog around, trying to get her to go to the bathroom because she was very restless. I'm thinking because she's also going through an evolution, and I don't feel the tiredness and all that stuff from being exposed to Walmart and all the people in Walmart. So I don't notice that now, my dog might be affected. So anyway, so she was affected a little bit. I think my husband heard something the other night. But anyway, so last night she got off the bed, and I kind of noticed she got off the bed, but I didn't get up because I was so tired. It's like 12 o'clock midnight. I'm like asleep, right? And I wake up and I still hear her downstairs clicking around, going in circles around the house. So I go downstairs and I take her outside. She just looks at the stairs and looks down, but doesn't do anything. And so I'm like, okay. So I take her back inside thinking like maybe she peed in the house or something. And I'm looking for it, but I'm like, okay, it's freaking late. So anyway, so I go upstairs and then she's still downstairs just pacing. I'm like, Jesus Christ. So I just take her outside again. And this time I make her go down the stairs and then she takes a poop. I'm like, okay, well, why could you do that before? But anyways, there's no reasoning with animals. They just do what they do. And she finally relaxed and she went upstairs and went to sleep. So I've been up at 4. I was listening to a video about the Assyrians. It's like a compilation of this guy has a channel that has a compilation of videos regarding like the fall of each civilization. And so it's very easy to get caught up and lost in the middle of different timelines and periods. And so that people get just like down rabbit holes and they never get out. And then they stay in that rabbit hole for their whole life. And they make money off those rabbit holes. And so I'm looking at the bigger picture because we're coming full circle. Obviously, we're coming full circle. And so I did a lot of studying this last summer, last winter, the last 5 freaking years, going back and forth to ancient civilization to even current modern day today and looking at the parallels, also getting caught up in the rabbit holes of science and politics and religion. But they're all connected. And so it's just making the connections and then doing an organized type of timeline. So I created one, and I don't know if you could see it. I mean, I finally got rid of the trinity of everything and put it away and decided that I need to now finally write down everything that I've been doing so that way I can talk about it. But what is going on right now is no different than what happened way in the beginning when mankind was first created. When the Sumerian pantheon, the gods, came down, and there were like 7 of them, the 7 tribes of Anunnaki, and then they are depicted in different ancient texts that don't necessarily say, okay, these were the giants, they call them the gods, but they didn't say, okay, these were the gods that came down, they were the giants or part of the giants, and they mixed with mankind and bioengineered mankind and caveman. I mean, there's a lot of things that are left out of history. We hear about, like, from college, like, I don't see college ever saying that humans were bioengineered. They just call it evolution. But you don't just turn into something. You don't one day you don't take on some DNA and you turn into from a primate to a human. That doesn't happen. It's not spontaneous. The evolution is bioengineering. And then it's also adaptation. So I'm going to add that up, add some stuff to that. But anyway, so I have from just right now, my loose timeline is going back to the most ancient civilization, which is Sumer, and the pantheon of Sumer, because Sumer was the first civilization that the gods came down and civilized mankind and bioengineered him to be a slave, because the gods were the teacher and the primates to the caveman to then civilized man became the slave. Okay, and then they were students as well. And so then that also turned mankind into then wanting to be a master, and some stayed masters and other stayed slaves. Some trained the slaves to be masters. I mean, you've seen it today. You have proteges, you have students of different gurus and all that. So it's what happened back then is no different than what's going on today in in the microcosm within little foundations and cliques and groups and families. Okay. So then I went from the 7 tribes of Sumer, the pantheon, the oldest civilization that first experienced the gods, then to the 6 cradles of civilization, which was the first Mesopotamia, which is Sumer, then the Indus Valley, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, then Mexico, the Mayan civilization, that's also Central America, China, the dynasties, the ancient Greeks, and then Peru, Inca civilization. And then there's the 10 oldest civilizations that ever existed. And that's the Mesopotamia, Sumer, Indus Valley, ancient Egypt, Mayan, Chinese civilization, ancient Greek, Persian civilization, Roman civilization, Aztec civilization, and the Inca. And then they were also overlapping each other, and they existed simultaneously as well. So that's probably why the Romans and the Aztecs and the Persians and the the Romans, the Aztecs and the Persians and the Inca, like the beginning of the Middle Ages, when it went from like 465 AD to 1521 AD, there's a lot of draconian things going on. People torturing each other, human sacrifice, the dungeons, like you see, like you've heard about the Tower in England, where they were doing just, the stretching stuff, and they're doing all the most horrific, torturous methods to keep people in line or extract information from the enemy or somebody else. So that's interesting to see the overlap, and then why then the human sacrifice with Aztec and the Incas and the Mayans, and you're like, oh my gosh. And that stuff is still practiced today. And not so much maybe human sacrifice, yes, we have the serial killers, but also the abuse in households in different cultures. They're going all the way back in the days of Sumer and the days of the oldest civilizations. That's what I'm saying. Mankind hasn't really evolved. We have better control, and we have better surveillance methods to try to stop something potentially happen. But right now we are in this whole, we're dealing with massive amounts of reproduction on bodies that were never really evolved. They were cured in the state that they were in through the salt. And so this is where the 3 races of mankind. Salt was the main thing that cured people in the state of their existence and their belief systems and their practices. And so that's why the whole dying and reproducing was maintained, because that's how they were able to propagate the human race and keep it going and then you see the rise and fall of civilizations. And so mankind has been broken down from the salt as the cured into 3 races of mankind. And it's like the Negroid, Africa, equatorial region, a lot of sun, the Mongoloids, the Asian Southwest and Southeast, a lot of sun, maybe not in other areas. And so there's like a mixture of the hue, their color. Then Caucasian, Caucasoid, /Asian, which some parts are lack of sun, so they don't get much melanin. And then they're in a cured state. So they can go and travel to Africa and take the salt and be in a cured state if they feel any kind of like evolution, so they can adapt to that region. And so that's why salt was so prevalent way back in the salt trade and in the Silk Road. Back in the biblical times, let's go back to the Bible, salt was very necessary to cure people in the state they were in, so they can maintain status quo and not have to feel the evolutionary symptoms of adapting to a new region as they were going and pillaging and raping and taking resources. And so salt probably has a very cataclysmic history as well as a really great history. And so it's a double-edged sword. So that's probably why a lot of people were reacting to the salt a couple years ago, because it probably is steeped with aggression, with just torturous warring history, because how, when you're going like when the Mongols are going across the 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 steppe, or what is it, China, going to Europe and covering territory like Genghis Khan, salt was probably very necessary so they can still maintain their body, mind, and spirit, and their warring spirit to go and kill and rape and pillage. So salt can cure somebody in a very dogmatic belief system, and it could be a catalyst to evolution. But I'm sure salt was being used to cure people so they would stay in a certain state and then they would die at some point, okay? And so you have the three races of mankind that was cured in a very specific race with the salt. And there's the melanic difference, the hormones, and then that's what created the countries, the language, the continents, the cultures, the races, okay? Because you have offshoots of the three races. And then we have the politics, religion, and science dogmas. And you can always go into that, and that's all based upon your different region and different continent and country and culture or whatever. And then you go into, then even below that is the cliques, the Socratic method of debate, annihilate, the cliques, the academic institutions, where people want to turn into demigods and gods and master, slave, student, teacher. You have the families that play the same games, the groups, the trade schools, the associations, the foundations. And so they're mimicking what the gods did in the beginning when they were teaching mankind how to grow corn and how to do stuff, okay? And so now we're back to full circle. Immortality versus mortality. Because the gods weren't like they were energy, but they were also had to be in a form of a human to be able to touch things. Okay? The gods that were immortal, they were immortal in a way that not they think that they should be alive today. And this is where I get confused. And I think like, oh, well, if the gods were immortal, then we should be seeing Zeus right now as president. No, immortality means that you don't die from natural causes. Immortality means that you're living longer than 150 years, 120, maybe 900 years. I mean, we've heard about the different biblical people that were immortal. There's a name I forget. Starts with the M. I'm sure somebody will know. But there are people of the Bible that lived to be 900 years. So in a lot of ways, if they were emperors and all that, they were immortal and they were lording that information. They were hoarding it to themselves, not giving it to the slaves. Okay, so immortality is really who was privileged enough to have the information to maintain their existence and not die and decline and go through that suffering. Okay, and so today we're now seeing the opportunity that you could be immortal, meaning that not like you're gonna be impervious to a volcano if you're thrown into the caldera of an active volcano. No, immortal means that you don't die from natural causes, that you can maintain existence through salts and through all the food supply with understanding pain and symptoms. I mean, I don't know how the immortals did it, lived 900 years old, and they were nation building. They had to have felt stuff. And maybe they knew that pain, and that's probably why all the torture methods, because they went through the pain of evolving. And so if they stabbed themselves and the body regrew the skin, it was painful. They put a little salt on it, put salt in wounds, it's painful. And then they figure out the power of pain to then control people. And so I could see why someone immortal who understood the power of pain and salt and food would stay alive and lord that information, and also understand history. Because 900 years, I mean, to live to 900 years, you're seeing the rise and fall of mankind. And you're watching families who are like, oh, they think that you're a god because you're living to 900 and they're only living to 100, and they're out there toiling the fields and building things for you as a god, as an emperor, as whoever, a giant. And so this is why there is this worshiping of someone of a higher power. I don't think they're a higher power. They just had knowledge that they weren't willing to share. That's the issue. That's the issue that I felt in my family when I would ask a question about this is that, and there's none of my business. Like, well, how much do you make, Mom and Dad? None of your business. What is this? None of your business. Or look it up in the dictionary, which I can understand that. But there's some things you just can't look up. There's some things that your parents should tell you. Yeah, well, I make this much money because I went through this much college. I had to really work hard in this way, and this is what I had to pay. I have my insurance, and I have, all these different bills, the gas, the electric, the groceries, and this is how you balance a checkbook. I mean, I learned how to balance a checkbook by the bank. Okay. Now, I'm not blaming my parents. I'm just saying that if we are making people learn the hard way, they'll get stuck in the research. And so I would rather, if I had a kid right now, I would teach them everything I knew. There would be nothing off the table. Nothing. I would not feel like I'd have to lord and hoard information because it made me feel like a fucking god. And that's what goes on right now in our society, is that people are lording and hoarding information. Or to say, oh yeah, you can join my group, and this is how you can access, this, and this if you do this, and this. And so then it's that whole, I don't know. And then, I don't know, then people start getting manipulated by someone who is lording and hoarding information. And so what I'm doing is saying, okay, here's all the information. You make the choice. You look at my stuff, and you can research everything I'm saying, and you can look at somebody else's perspective and juxtaposition the two, and then you will make your own choice on what you're willing to deal with. And so now we're at the point where we're immortality, like the gods in the beginning, versus mortality. And you can choose. And I'm sure all the gods that taught mankind how to drink, smoke, and have a bunch of sex knew that was a way to control them through the pleasure and pain sensations of their hormones. And so that is why we have such mortality in our world, because we have too many people just lost in the pleasure, don't want to feel pain, and they're only here for a very certain amount of time to do their job, whatever that is. I mean, they could be a lawyer, they could be a teacher, a doctor, being basically a demigod, policeman, fireman, you could be the savior. So like you're a savior or a demigod or a god. And then there are the slave class. But then even the demigods and gods are the slave class, because slave class is where you're only here for like less than 100 years. You're dying and reproducing. That's the slave class mentality. And so this is where sovereignty is, where you maintain and lord of your own world, as well as being plugged into the matrix of a community of you trading information back and forth, but you're still promoting life. You're not destroying somebody else. You're not promoting destruction. You're not taking money from a destructive industry. And so this is now where the split's going to be in our society. It's already happening. That's why I was so attacked back in 2016, 2017, 2018 around the salt, because salt has two sides. It is a catalyst to evolution, and it is a cure to evolution. And when you cure evolution, you cure somebody in a very violent state, and they have done some horrible things. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. Salt can free somebody into a non-evolutionary state where they are violent, they are draconian, they are despots, and you've seen that in the emperors like Caligula and other emperors and other leaders of the world that were very, very horrific to people, genocide. And then salt could also be the catalyst to evolution, the pain, but then pain has already been taught that you shouldn't feel it, and everyone's afraid of it. And so salt definitely has a major history behind it, but I see the intention behind why we have the different races, and why a person from Norway who's very pale skin would not change into the color of the indigenous population at the equatorial region, because they're in a cured state. First of all, they're not going to evolve. And so when you're in a cured state, of decline, you're not going to have the hormonal melanin come up, because then you would start burning, and then you have to go through an evolution and deal with that evolution of gaining that melanin, of dealing with that region. And it's painful. And so someone from Norway would get skin cancer in a very sunny region. And so that's why they wear sunblock and have all these different things to stop them from dying, because if you get cancer, it means you're at a deficit and another virus is trying to take over a body at a deficit. And so that's why people with pale skin are in fear of the sun, because they might get skin cancer. And then that is all connected to the 7 tribes. Because you heard about Enlil. I mean, you saw that guy Aaron Steiner, who I've attached some links to his group page, his public page, where they talk about the Lilith and Lilith's children, the elves, the elven community, how these 7 Anunnaki are linked to the different colors of the skin based upon the different regions. And some look like elves, others look like different, I don't say monsters, but they're more aggressive looking. And then we have bioengineering that has also softened some of the features out there so they're not so aggressive. But there's just some people still look a little like, oh crap. But I mean, we don't want to go there, because when you look at like that picture of that reptilian, they're saying that Caucasoids, the Lilith's children are part reptilian, they're advanced form from Sirius, whatever, and they're part reptilian, but there are some very aggressive looking reptilian faces, and there are very softer features that are part reptilian. But reptilian isn't bad. I mean, look at your skin. Like Tina Fowler made a very great point about our skin shedding like a reptile. Okay, so humans and reptiles are not that different when you think about it. Okay, and then you look at also to like the monkeys, primates, so what all that. I mean, there's all the animals. This makes sense. All the animals and the humans, we're all linked together in some way. There's DNA, a little piece of DNA from each of the, even though we're not like the same genus or same species, it's still all linked together. And so that's why viruses jumping from animals to human, it's not out of the realm of possibility. You can also splice and dice viruses in labs and release them. But animals can give off viruses. Would it create a worldwide pandemic? Well, why today? Why? What was so different about 2019 that made a worldwide pandemic be so extraordinary? Okay, we've been around animals forever. I've been around my dog forever. But I sometimes think my dog looks human. Like you look at her eyes and her eyes look really, really human. And then you can see there's a soul. But she also doesn't have the opposable thumbs. But she can reason, because she knows when it's raining outside and she doesn't want to go down the steps, she'll pee on the deck. So she'll make conscious choices, and I think it's kind of funny. So, but of course she's an animal. She can reason on some level. She just can't do some of the things that we can do. So anyway, so I pretty much have my book. I really did a lot of studying this last summer, writing about the different details of stuff. But there's a bigger picture that you can look up the details of politics. You can look up the details of all the different religions. The Freemasons and the Catholic Church understand this, and that's a Western perspective. There's a bigger perspective than the Western perspective. And so I even have to broaden my perspective on how I'm going to write this, because it should be for the world, not just for Western Civ and the Western world, not just for the English speaking people. I mean, when my book gets translated, it'll get translated into all the different languages at some point, because I'm going to encapsulate everything from the Anunnaki all the way to I'm not going to go into too much detail of each civilization, but I will acknowledge the 6, cradles of civilization and the 10 oldest civilizations on some level, without going into too much detail and too much of reinventing the wheel. And then all the different gods and the religions. This is where the 10 oldest civilizations, gods and religions. It's the Hindu, the oldest religions. That's right, I missed this one. Gods and religions, Hindu and the Bhagavad Gita. And Hindu is the oldest religion, actually. And they have gods and deities. And then you have the Chinese, the Buddhism, the Taoism, the Islam, the Catholicism, Protestantism. And so then they start morphing and evolving. So actually China is really evolved when you think about it, because they went from Buddhism, the Buddhist dude, the god, whatever, all the way. I mean, they have Buddhism, and that's probably, Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, Catholicism, Protestantism, and then there's philosophers in the Bible, and they have other gods, but they went all the way from the oldest to the most youngest. Okay, and then you have the Greek and Roman, the Judeo-Christian, Islam, Old Testament and New Testament, all the offshoots. Okay, so that's after the 10 oldest civilizations ever existed, and then you have all the gods and religions. Okay, and China seems to be the most progressive. Fancy that. So maybe China isn't as bad as you think if they're very progressive enough to have all those types of religions and belief systems. Now, I know they're trying to re-educate some of the Uyghurs out there. Is it Uyghurs? That's how you say it. But I'm not sure how that all works. But they still have a lot of diversity, even in China, when you think about it. And so then I went all to the three races and the countries. So how I can see all this is when I look at families, I look at groups, I look at cliques, I look at how homogenous people are, and then how they resist evolution. And that's no different than when you have the 7 tribes of the Anunnaki all in different parts of the world that created mankind, and they were always at war with each other because they didn't understand that they needed to work together to survive. And so the only thing they knew how to do from a baser level instinct was to fight or flight. And so if anything new came in, they would have to destroy it. And that's no different back then than it is today. When someone brings in new information or a new person comes to a group, the first instinct is to destroy. I've seen it on The Real Housewives when Vicky Gunvalson did not welcome the new girl that came on the show. She was like acting like a caveman that couldn't deal with new evolution. And so you see the baser instincts on TV in some of these reality shows. You see it in families and in groups and in cliques today, and even in academia. And you see it also in just in politics, religion, and science. Okay, salt, which has been around for freaking centuries, is a catalyst of evolution, and it will cure you in whatever state you choose to be in. And so this is what I recognize in my Jilly Juice crowd, is that people is stuck in 2 factions. Those that stay on the Jilly Juice and the salt because they want to be in a cured state, and they're also in the religious world. I noticed that correlation too. And those that are not religious, not taking on a political thought process or religious or a scientific dogma, they got off the Jilly Juice. They're dealing with the pain. They're not taking apple cider vinegar and other prebiotic crap stuff, whatever, that they have found in their religious society that they're still very stuck into. And so I even see this split in the Jilly Juice world. And so this is so like interesting, but I needed to map this out so that way I don't get caught up in the details of the stuff, because you guys can Google the details. I'm going to just do a gloss over of all of this and to show the evidence that division and the biochemistry and the bioengineering has caused so much of what's going on. And now we're in a great reset, because you can't now take 7 billion people and destroy 6.5 all at once. It's going to be a gradual decline, and it'll be through the virus. It won't be through a flood. Well, it might be through a flood in certain places, but the virus is the ring that rules them all. And so now you all are an equal playing field. You have a choice. You can be immortal, which means that, no, you're not going to survive a freaking volcano if you're thrown into a caldera, okay? But you will not die from natural causes if you understand the power of salt, but also when to get off it, but have a high sodium diet with a diverse food supply. And you can withstand new viral energy. And then you can also listen to indicators to get out of harm's way, or it can be mortal and get lost in the pain and the pleasure and the pleasure and the pain, or mitigating pain in the holistic allopathic world and the energy healing world with the gurus and the demigods and the yogis and all the people that want to pretend that they're God and they're a master and they want their slaves. They want to be a teacher. And that's playing the game of in the beginning, where people were enslaving each other, when the gods enslaved mankind to mine gold and do whatever else. And so I noticed that energy in the people that came through, especially those that were in the energy healing world, in the holistic world, even in the allopathic licensed professionals with very specific energy. I could sense they were going to try to be a demigod, goddess, and even some of my old moderators. I created little gods in the moderators in the beginning with the 60,000 person group. Didn't know it, but I did. And now I see that behavior, and that's why there's no moderators in my group. I'm the only one that's relatively moderating, but I want people just to share their experience without mischaracterizing their experience. And that's it. I'm not trying to trade cures. I'm not trying to mitigate pain. I just want people to share what's going on with them so others can see that they can survive their symptoms too. They eat all the food in the food supply, and we're not trying to mitigate pain. You get the poop out any way you can. Drink meat, milk, whatever, or drink milk and all that. And if it doesn't work, then you do what you have to do to get the poop out, and you figure out how all of your system works. And if you have to do research on the internet, do research on the internet. Don't rely on me to give you all the answers. Don't rely on people in my group to give you answers. That's why there's no question and answer, because I remember that's why I always got so pissy when people asked questions. I couldn't articulate why, but the reason is I don't want you to come in at a deficit. If you have the ability to read, okay, then you read the information. If you don't know how to read, you need someone to tell you. Well, this is where there are 7 billion people in the world, and there's probably like 500 million that don't know how to read. I don't have the energy to take 500 million, even incrementally, to take them through this. That would be a doctor-patient relationship. And so already the JJ mentality is going to not work for most of the population, because I can't possibly be the one to teach 500 million who cannot read how to deal with pain. Now, I know people can go out there and try to do that, but at this point, you need to save yourself. At some point, you got to save yourself. And the ones that have access to information, the ones that are strong enough to maintain a platform of equilibrium so they can evolve, they're the ones that our society, our system wants. Taking someone from 0 to 60 is no more. Okay? We have given people, even in our society in like America and the West, we've taken them from kindergarten or preschool all the way up to 12th grade, and then you have a choice to go to higher education. So we have given people many opportunities of a platform to work with. Not everybody is taken to the platforms. Teachers are just at their wits' end. Parents are just not evolving, and so the kids are coming in at major deficits, and so they're already taxed. So the whole JJ mentality is also splitting the classes of our world into immortals versus mortals. But you still have the chance. If you want my information, you can't read, then you get someone to read the information to you. You listen to my videos. But you cannot depend upon someone else to teach you bit by bit, spoon feed you as an adult. Because if you have to do that, to have someone spoon feed you the information, how are you surviving? Okay, if you're surviving with somebody who is taking care of you, then have that person taking care of you read the information if they're on board. They're probably your guardian or whatever, and so they need to be the one to process this information with you so you can get on board. But this information are for those that are relatively independent, who have already established that they can conceptualize the world and they can make decisions and take responsibility. They're responsible for not only themselves, but for other people. They have shown they can be relatively, reliable, and that they can also do this on their own. This is not for someone who is so dependent that they need someone to read it to them, unless they have someone who's on board with them to do it. Okay? And so J-Juice is giving people the option if you have the capacity and the support system. If you don't have the capacity or the support system, you can't do it anyways. There's no, you won't survive. Don't waste your time. Okay? So it does definitely weed out those that are not appropriate for independence and sovereignty and body, mind, and spirit. So anyways, that's all I'm going to say for now, but I wanted to show you what I've been working on this morning since 4:00 this morning. And then I'm just going to, this is going to be the skeleton of my book when you think about it. Okay. I'm going to make this as short as possible, not too thick, because I don't want to lose people's interest, but I want to give them the once over so they understand we're now back to full circle. We're back to the beginning. Immortal versus mortal. But now you have a chance to be immortal. And no one's going to be lording information or hoarding information from you. You have the chance to take that information and do something with it and make your life better. Okay, bye.